Mayong adlaw, December 1, 2022. So, mabit na matapos ang karon nga tuig, dali lang ang panahon. O if we look back, we can always bank on the faithfulness of God. Yan pagkamatinumanon sa ato sa ani nga tuig, dali ra gyud kayo. But today, padayon kita sa Job. So last time on Job, we talked about it is the background of the story of the Messiah, the suffering Messiah. Job was called, have you seen my servant? Sa gingon pa niya kang Satan. Ug mao to nga itugutan sa Ginoo nga kwaon ng tanan kang Job ug patipod nga ang iyang health mo ay maapektuhan. But it's all through the permission sa Ginoo. Kung so unsa lagi tugot sa Ginoo, mao lang to ang gibuhat ni Satanas. Ug mao ang dakong difference nila sa kang Jesus, the suffering Messiah, because he was really harmed until death. Pero si Job, he was spared of his life. Secondly, we see that Job never really understood and never knew in his lifetime, most likely, wala gid niya nasabtan nga no nahitabo ka to. And it's always the why question. When we are suffering, the question is always why. Very big, W-H-Y. And dagan kitag mga rationalization sa may tabo sa ato. And of course, we want to ask God because He is above us. But then, many times He doesn't tell us. Even in the story of Job, He did not really tell Job. Even if you fast forward, later on silang storya, when the Lord replied to them in chapter 38, He never said to Job, nga no nag-agi si Job ato makalisod. And yes, that's a very difficult truth. Before we try to answer that one, anyway, we know that we don't have to know, but we have to trust na gitawag faith. That's why faith fills the mysteries, the gaps na di natubalan. So na ang pagtuo. So salamat sa pagtuo. But before we try to answer that one again, because that's always in the back of our minds, let us see what happened next. So after it says 2 times man dinhi nga nag-adto ang mga anghel dito sa Ginoo. Yes, Satan also was there. He had to present himself. So dili siya kalikay. Interesting na story. Yeah, why would he still be there? Because God wants him to be there. So he went there. Mo to the conversation again. Have you seen my servant Job? Skin for skin. Ingon ni Satan sa una, limited po si Satan. Ingon siya, kung kwaon ni mo yung kaptangan, he will curse you and die. But Job did not. And then the second time, skin for skin. Pasakiti siya na yun. And he will curse you and he wants to die. And then in the third chapter, we see here the breaking point of Job. There was really a breaking point. If in chapters 1 and 2, it says, in all of these things, he did not sin. Wala naman po gi-mention din from chapter 3 until to 42. But we see that he was at his breaking point. He really said, I curse the day that I die. Diba? May pagwa na lang ko na tao. So it's really a complaint. He's starting to break. Naging si Job. And it shows to us that all of us have breaking points. Tinood man gid na. The problem with religion, it always presents us to be holy and pure and perfect. And it seems there's no breaking point to us. And of course, that is not natural for us. That is not our default mode. In fact, I was reading, it says, in reality, we really do not have a free will. Yes, we had a free will, we had a choice when God created us like Him. But after that, we are always enslaved to ourselves. We are always enslaved to our sin. And that's why when we are presented a choice, we would always choose ourselves. It's really a struggle. Panigurado sa itong kaugalingon. And we would always pull into that dito sa birahon kita dito sa sala. Okay? That's why it enslaves us. That's why in reality, we do not have free will, really. Because we are always enslaved because we are sinful. That's our default mode. And that's the reality of who we are. Even Job here, he had his breaking point. But before I forget, why would God really, going back to the why question, why would really God, idalit pa niya si Job? But one thing that we could be assured, if God makes a person righteous, He vouches for that righteousness. If He said, "You look at my servant Job," He vouches for that righteousness because it comes from Him. But of course, it inserts here the reality of who we are. We are in this evil world, and we are in this fleshly body which rots, but one of these days it will be glorified. It's decaying. And of course, we have our breaking points. At tinuod gid na we are both sinner, matarong kita sa tubangan sa we are saint, matarong kita sa tubangan sa Ginoo because of His righteousness given to us. And of course, we are also sinners. Makasala pa kita. And that's why we look forward to the consummation of salvation, which includes our bodies, the glorification of our bodies. And that would make sense atong kinabuhi, that we are not detaching ourselves from the reality of where we are right now. Yes, in the sight of God, positionally, we are righteous. Okay? And He vouches for that righteousness. But then, of course, we are in this evil world. We suffer from our own choices and what other people do. And sometimes God allows suffering to come to us. But then, we have this glorification. We have this salvation one of these days. So we are looking forward to that. That's why, again, faith comes in. Faith fills the gap. Okay? So here, he was at this breaking point and he was complaining. And I find it very amusing when he was complaining and his friends were telling him, it's really your fault. Imo ning sala. In fact, klaro kayo sa unang storya ni Eliphaz, ingon niya sa chapter 4 verse 8. My experience ingon ni Eliphaz shows that those who plant trouble and cultivate evil will harvest the same. So he was just saying indirectly that it's really your fault because you did something wrong. Dili magina pwede. Okay? So it's always our judgment when something bad happens to us, we deserve it. Ikaw man eh. And sometimes it's true, but in the case of Job, of course it was not, because he never knew that there was really curtain behind, and that was the conversation in heaven between God and Satan. He never knew that. That's why his sufferings, he did not come because of his own choices, but it was God who permits it. And no, we have a struggle for that. But even Job acknowledged it. Ingon niya, di ba siyang misis? Should we only accept good things from God and not the negative one, the evil ones? Diba? Ingon niya dito, and he himself acknowledged it. That's why there is no use arguing, did it really come from God? No, it did not. Because Job himself was acknowledging the fact that all of these things come from God. Yeah, and that's the reality of it. When we look at the story of the Bible, we're just reading the narrative. It doesn't need our opinion. It doesn't need our dissection. We just have to accept what's there because that's the narrative already. We cannot change it. And we could not suit it atong ihisibo para sa atong kagulingong pangunahuna. So, ingon sa Eliphaz, imo gining sala. And then he continued complaining. In fact, in verse, in chapter 6, ingon si Job, in chapter 6, verse 6, don't people complain about unsalted food? Does anyone want the tasteless white and of egg? So pati ang itlog, siguro kinahurot na magid ang iyang mga kabtangan, no, ang iyang mga kahayupan, and that was their source also of income and food. So now they're eating eggs na lang. Kita ni mo grabe gid kay ang kagiyan ni Job. Pero kung siya di ba mo reklamo magaling tao kanang way lami nga puti sa itlog? So hard-boiled egg. Diyan, my appetite disappears when I look at it. I gag at the thought of eating it. Kaso kaon daw siyang mutanaw sa hard-boiled egg. Way lami. Complain may kunong tao anak, kini pa kang giagian niya sa iyang kinabuhi. So he was really at his breaking point. He was really broke. Okay? Bali gid si Job. And of course, the other stories of his friends, they are still insisting that it was his fault. In fact, they said, kapoy na may paminaw sa imong insistence of your integrity. Okay, that you did nothing wrong, which is true. Diba? Wala maging sige buhat to na dili man to iyang own decision that he is going to suffer. But then we see here at the very end, when God spoke to them in chapter 8. Now, when we see chapter 3 until to chapter 37, it was all the conversation of Job back and forth with his friends. And you know, the Lord allows us to have these conversations. The Lord allows us to complain. I'm not saying it's good to complain, but He allows us, right, to air what is ever in our hearts, to cry and to weep, to mourn. Sa ingon pa nila. But then he appears in chapter 38. We'll talk more about it on Sunday. But one of my favorite movies, our favorite movie is the movie Godfather by well, the favorite actor was Al Pacino, but before that, forgot his name. But tukaraan na kayo nga actor. But one of the favorite lines is, I will give him an offer that he could not refuse. There is this the storyline of the Godfather movie where he muscles his way, di ba? Braso niya ang kagalingon. But it's, yeah, he muscled his way through guns, using guns and guns. But before that, there was this muscling through words, mga pulong lang. And I'm not saying that God is a Godfather moral portrayal, but somehow, that's how God does it. He puts us into place. Many times, Job mentions the word dust. Dust. And I found out that the Hebrew word for dust is actually word for humiliation or humility or abasement, being nothing, brought to nothing. In the account of the creation, when God said He is going to form us on the dust of the ground, it's somehow it says the meaning is that both paradoxical ni. Because out from the dust, out of the ground, comes the precious minerals. Diba? Metallurgy, ang mga pinaka-gwapo kayo, ang gold, nickel, tanan nga mga precious, it comes from the ground. So it meant very well when He says, I created you from dust, because out from the ground where precious metals come. But then when death came, when sin came, He said, from dust you are, and to dust you shall return. So it was mentioned again 2 times. On the second mention, it was about abasement, being nothing, humility. That's when you touch the ground, you are bowing yourself down, and you're saying, you are God. Okay, I am nothing. And that's what happened to us. That's why we return to the ground. So from dust you were created, it was precious. Out from it comes precious metals. And to dust you return, it's humiliation, abasement. And God, through His words here in Job, when he replied to Job, He replied with questions. He was putting His place that He is God and Job is human. And we'll talk more about it Sunday. But that's how God talks to us. He really puts us in our place kung kinsa kita tao. Ug iya pong ibutang ang iyang kagalingon asa siya ang Dios. So He is our God. And it's all questions, not because Job nasa exam, but it just to show that we could not question the wisdom of God of why all of these things are happening to us. Whether it could be good or whether it be evil, we cannot question the wisdom of God. But again, we could trust in Him. Because again, faith fills the gap, the mysteries of the things that we do not know.